Hello, welcome. This speaker series session is being hosted by Business and Arts in Toronto. I have the honor to be a guest on this land, the traditional lands and waters of the Petun and Wendat peoples and the Anishinaabeg and Haudenosaunee confederacies, and most recently, the Mississaugas of the Credit River, as well as many other Indigenous nations, some of whose names are no longer remembered. We acknowledge all who came before us and has traveled the lands and waters of this territory. By saying the names of the original keepers, we remember that this territory continues to be subject to the dish with one spoon, wampum belt covenant, an agreement between the Haudenosaunee Confederacies and Three Fires Confederacy of the Anishinaabeg to peacefully share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. Today, the meeting place of Toronto is still the home of many Indigenous peoples from across the continent, and we are grateful to live and work in the community on this territory. While reconciliation means different things to each community, let it compel us to move beyond words of acknowledgement. If it were a word in Anishinaabemowin, it would be a verb meaning to make right the wrongs, and in this context, to commit to learning the history and responsibility in genocide, displacement, and theft of land from the Indigenous nations across the land known as Canada, and to continually decolonize frameworks and roles that were imposed upon Indigenous nations. We remind ourselves of how urgently current this history is, and we all have a choice in how we participate in the treaty of this place. Thank you for joining us for this session on Wellness in the Arts. My name is Karan Sahadio, and I'm the Creative Director in Business and Arts. I would like to firstly say thank you to Power Corporation of Canada for sponsoring the speaker series this year, which allows us to have important conversations such as today's. We're also grateful to have Christopher from Toronto Sign Language Interpreter Service providing ASL interpretations. Towards the end of the session, we will open the floor to the audience to ask questions. If you have any questions during the session, please input them in the Q&A box below. Please say who you would like to direct the questions to, and since time will be limited, we encourage you to vote on the questions most important to your organization. The questions with the most votes will be posed to our speakers. I think what was really solidified in the early days of the pandemic is the fact that the general public relies on the arts and culture sector to help them through difficult situations. Just like exercise is a great way to keep our physical health in check, being engulfed in stories, visiting a museum, watching a musical, or just being around anything creative can do wonders for our mental well being. This was noticed in 2018 by Montreal Museum of Fine Arts when they partnered with physicians to allow admission by prescription to highly stressed individuals rather than using conventional medicine. And according to the Hill Strategies report titled Canadians' Arts Participation, Health and Well-Being, which analyzed data from Statistics Canada from 2016 and was released earlier in February, 62% of cultural participants report either very good or excellent mental health. Business and Arts' very own Culture Track Canada study, released in 2018, revealed that 71% of culture goers are motivated specifically to feel less stressed, and 51% specifically said they wanted to have better well being. The public relies on the arts and culture sectors for mental health benefits. So, what happens when access to the arts is taken away? According to Business and Arts' most recent arts response tracking study, only 29% of culture goers feel comfortable with purchasing a single ticket to an arts or cultural activity in 2021. And only 12% are comfortable purchasing a membership or subscription to their favorite institution. Since the pandemic started, and with on and off again lockdowns, only 9% of Canadians have returned to an outdoor cultural event, and only 5% to an indoor one. Arts workers are in a very difficult position because the public relies on them to produce content that benefits their wellness, but many organizations are not in a position to put on productions to the same scale as pre COVID 19. But even prior to the pandemic, many in the industry suffered from mental emotion as well as physical fatigue. The few that weren't laid off were expected to not only salvage their organizations, but to learn new technologies and ways of operating to adapt to this new reality. According to the National Arts and Culture Impact Survey, commissioned by a group of 30 national and provincial arts service organizations, close to 80% of individuals and organizations report very high or high levels of anxiety. This is up 25% prior to the COVID-19 pandemic. I think it's worth mentioning that these mental health and wellness issues are not brand new due to COVID 19, but they have been exacerbated because of the pandemic. Arts workers have always struggled with being overworked and undervalued. The fact that mental and emotional strain and expectations are disproportionately higher on Black, Indigenous, and peoples of color communities is not brand new. These underserved communities have and continue to struggle with access to quality care. Today's session will share some stories about struggles relating to the Arts and Culture Center. This session is not designed to be a definitive guide on how to overcome mental health and wellness struggles within your organizations. It will barely scratch the surface because this is a larger conversation and hopefully one of many conducted by business and arts. What this session will offer are some case studies of unique struggles experienced by our four speakers and what they are doing to benefit artists, their organization, and their community, respectively. The first speaker will be Shelly Ann Lee. Shelly Ann is a research and quality improvement lead at the Al and Malka Green Artists Health Center, part of the University Health Network, where she identifies, oversees, and conducts research activities that are in accordance with the values and missions of the health center. Shellyan specializes in research and design methods, program evaluations, as well as implementation and knowledge translations of evidence based practices. With over 6 years of experience in leading health research projects, she's published numerous peer reviewed articles and shared her findings at national and international conferences. Her vision is to use research to improve the health and well being of professional artists and to educate healthcare professionals and their greater community. To meet many unique health needs of professional artists, Shelley Ann aims to implement evidence based practices that have a lasting, positive impact on their health and well being. After Shelley Ann, we will speak to Gilad Cohen, the founder and executive director of Jayu. Since 2008, Gilad has worked as an artist, public speaker, and community mobilizer with a focus on connecting audiences to urgent and compelling stories through the multimedia arts. In 2012, Gilad founded Jayu, an award winning Toronto based charity that serves the arts communities through the annual Human Rights Film Festival, The Hum, which is a human rights podcast he produces and co hosts, as well as the I Am program, an initiative that provides arts and social justice mentorship to more than 250 underserved youths from across the Greater Toronto Area each year. He is an alumnus of the Toronto Arts Council Leadership Lab and the Rothschild Fellowship at the University of Cambridge in the United Kingdom. Our final two speakers will be Camille Laive and Camille Georgeson Usher from Indigenous Curatorial Collective. Camille Laive is a street artist, independent curator, writer, and arts workers based in Jojage or Montreal. Their curatorial practice revolves around the invisibility of BIPOC and 2S LGBTQ QIA plus artists and muralists in urban public spaces. Camille is the director of programming for the Indigenous Curatorial Collective. Camille Georgeson Usher is a Coast Salish Satu Dene Scottish scholar, artist, and writer currently based in Toronto from Galliano Island, British Columbia. Usher completed her MA in Art History at Concordia University. She is currently a PhD student in the Cultural Studies Department at Queen's University, completing a research creation based dissertation on ontologies of gathering in urban centers. Usher is the executive director of the Indigenous Curatorial Collective and is a writer, artist, and long distance runner. All right, welcome everyone, and thank you so much for joining us and sharing your stories today. Shelly Ann, can you tell us a little bit about the Alamalca Green Artist Health Center, the work being done, and what patterns in mental and emotional strain you're noticing?
Sure. Thanks you so much for having me here. So the Alan Melka Green Artist Health Center is the only clinic in Canada that specializes in serving the entire artistic community. So we're a facility in the Family and Community Medicine program at the University Health Network, which is located in Toronto, Ontario. So our team here specializes in addressing the very specific needs of healthcare artists, of artists. We provide artists with health services such as medical care, physiotherapy, massage therapy, mental health services, and many other ones as well. And so many of the professional artists that we see at the center suffer from anxiety, depression, and they're often feeling very stressed. So many of the artists, I'm just going to give you some examples. So they suffer from imposter syndrome, performance anxiety. They endure a lot of mental stress because of the precarious nature of the work. So if you think about it, their income is very unstable and many of them don't hold unionized contracts. So this means that the work they do lack the basic job security that many of us who are not in artistic professions currently have. And because of that, their main stream of revenue is from the gigs and the contracts that they receive. And there's actually a lot of artists who don't vocalize about their mental health issues because, they're fearing that it might, not look so good upon them, right? So there's a lot of stigma around mental health, which means that artists suffer in silence and they do not seek the help that they actually need.
And that brings me to my next question. Where would you say this mental health stigma comes from, and how does it affect arts workers?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So if we take a look at how artists get work, we can better understand why mental health stigmas exist, right? So many artists obtain their work through word of mouth and referrals. So reputation is big. It's very important, and words do get around in your community about how you're doing, how you're performing. So many artists worry that if their colleagues or employer or their larger community found out about their mental health status, they may lose their gigs or that they would not be referred at all. So suddenly you're seen as unfit for the role, or maybe you might be seen as incompetent. And not to only mention that, there's many other artists who are just waiting for the roles just like theirs, right? So employers have a lot of other artists to choose from. So being in a non-unionized contract also doesn't help the situation. So the stigma doesn't stop at mental health either. So it also applies to other health issues. And I'm just going to give a very quick example of some of the professional artists that we see. So artists who acquired, injuries are perceived as less competent. So if they tell others that, let's say they injured their back because they've been practicing, their specific, let's say they're dancing, right? So they're not actually perceived as hardworking if they, injure because of their practicing too much. They would actually be perceived as, oh, maybe the form is wrong, or they might have, incorrectly, performed some of the, practice, some of the recitals. So that's why they result in injuries, which is not true. So over time, this sustained injury can limit what they do. So some artists can't even do what they do anymore, which is very unfortunate because of their sustained injuries. So as a result, they are a lot more vulnerable to anxiety and depression. And it's really a vicious cycle that the stigma has created.
So, what advice would you give to organizations working with artists and for their own staff?
Yeah, so this means that organizations that work with professional artists should recognize the high prevalence of mental health issues that plague this community. So organizations should consider working on eliminating stigma around mental health and encourage artists to access mental health services. So what ends up happening is that the artists do not seek help, and we had already mentioned, they suffer in silence. And so because they may not be educated around the implications or the consequences of their injuries, and sometimes it can be not a huge issue, but after a while, if it's sustained, then it really starts impacting their health. and then it becomes chronic. So, I spoke to many artists that share very similar stories regardless of their artistic profession. So having better job security can be a start, and just recognizing that, the value they bring to the workplace is also another area that perhaps organizations can focus on. So many artists already feel that they are disposable due to the fierce competition. So it'll be very important for them to acknowledge what professional artists do and the unique talents that they bring, so they do feel accepted and valued. So another way is to perhaps provide the education that artists need around consequences of mental health problems. So one practical way to educate artists is to get them to be aware of the seminars that are online, or any webinars and sessions or that they can attend, which can be freely available to artists. So a final way perhaps is to foster a community within the organization for artists to provide support for each other. So that, with a sense of community, they can look to each other for the support while they, battle these mental health issues, so that they're not doing this in isolation. And organizations need to send the message that, it's okay to have mental health issues, just like how we have a flu or a cold, it's okay. And this is what you need to do.
Okay, perfect. And I think a lot of what you're saying translates over to arts workers as well as artists, because a lot of arts workers are artists by trade. So
Mhm.
can you speak, sorry, can you speak to what you notice about the precarity of being a gig worker?
So the precarious nature of the artistic profession is very prevalent. So unstable hours, working overtime, canceled and delayed payments are actually quite typical. It's not uncommon at all. So imagine, you show up at work and you work for, let's say, 12 hours, and after 3 months, you finally get a hold of your employer about your payment, and then they end up saying that your payment was the opportunity to network. They are giving you this platform to showcase and to perform. So this is basically your payment after the 12 hours of work. And so because you're not unionized, there's really nothing that reprimands the employers who decide not to follow through with their agreement or their promise. And then, you try to appeal, but, now you're putting your reputation on the line. So you don't want to be known for someone that's very difficult to work with. So it's really a vicious cycle here that needs to be broken. Clear communication between the artist and the employer or organization needs to happen at the very least, like whether this is actually going to be a paid gig or how long the artist is expected to work for.
Yeah, I think what you're saying is very sobering. And it's something that we as arts workers and artists know very well, but I'm not sure how widely known it is. And I think part of the struggle artists and arts workers also face is the idea of overworking, or the hustle is romanticized in our society. I know many in the industry, especially millennials, who treat the idea of almost burning out as a badge of honor. And I think with that idea of overworking, Galad, can you tell us a little bit about Jayu and what type of work is being done?
Yeah, first of all, thank you so much to Arts Fest and Business for the Arts. And Shelly Ann, thank you so much for sharing. That was really, really informative. I'm excited to dig deeper with all of you on this beautiful Friday afternoon. So I'm the founder and executive director at Jayu. We're a Toronto-based charity committed to sharing human rights stories through the arts. Our year-round programs include I Am, which is an initiative that we've been providing since 2015, which provides arts and social justice mentorship to hundreds of equity-seeking youth across the GTA. We do the Human Rights Film Festival each year in December. We have a podcast called The Hum. And then last year, as part of the pandemic, as a response to the pandemic, we introduced a brand new free program where on the last Tuesday of every month, we present a free and virtual arts presentation for the general public.
All right. So in early 2020, you made the decision to move Jayu away from a traditional 5-day, 40-hour work week. Can you tell us a little bit about the changes made and what led to them?
For sure, and a lot of it has to tie into what you both were just talking about. So I took a look at this registration list for this event, and a majority of you out there who are listening are either arts workers, arts administrators, or artists. Most of you probably work for a nonprofit or registered charity, and even if you don't, even if you're coming at this event today from the corporate sector, I want you to ask yourselves how often have you heard yourselves or someone you know express how bonkers things are at work, how stressed they are, how they've just, oh my God, OMG, I just worked a 16-hour day, or how they WTF just put in time on the weekends because there was just so much work. And if you think about it enough, the way that we usually express this stress, it's not so much complaining, but there's a sense of pride to it, of burning ourselves into the ground. Karan, you just said a badge of honor. So prior to working at Jayu, I worked for a handful of other film festivals in the city, and I can't tell you how often I'd hear folks, myself included, justify sleeping like 3 hours a night, eating like crap, or outright forgetting to eat food or drink water entirely, not exercising, not seeing family for months on end, all in the name of it being festival season or festival mode or campaign season. And even if you come from the corporate sector, I'm going to do a really terrible impression because I have no idea what it would sound like, but it might be something like, oh man, the end of Q3 is coming up and we're behind on projections and I'm pulling 16-hour days to hit the mark. That sort of lifestyle, unless you're a superhero or superhuman, deeply impacts your physical and mental health. Years ago, and I think he actually may be listening, a friend of mine who works for a major cultural institution in Toronto once actually fainted on stage in front of thousands of people because they forgot to drink enough water that day. And we all have some version of these battle stories that we often share, and we share them with pride. And to be clear, this isn't something to be proud of. It's something to be deeply concerned about. And yet we wear it as a badge of honor, when in fact it should be something we should be looking at and running the hell away from. And so it doesn't have to keep being like this horror movie where you sort of see this character walking down an alleyway and the viewer knows that there's a monster, yet they don't, and they keep approaching it closer and closer, much to everyone's frustration. We all have the power to turn around and save ourselves. So I started questioning all of this, and I started questioning our work structure in general, and why do we work 9 to 5? Why are we working 5 days a week? Why the minimum 40 hours a week? I'd like to also think that we've invented a lot of productivity hacks since the 1920s, when the 9 to 5 became a norm, and developed so much knowledge around mindfulness and mental health and balance and rest and doing things more efficiently. And yet in the modern age, it seems like we're somehow working longer hours than ever. And it's not that there's more work to do, it's just that we are more accessible to one another than ever. Work and email is right there on our phones. So is social media. And now that we're working at home, work is always there in the next room. So it's not that there's more work to do, it's just that there are more distractions while we do the work. So I started researching this radical idea of a 4-day work week. And here's some data that I came across, which I'll just read. So Microsoft Japan tried out a 4-day work week and reported that productivity rose by 40%. Another company out in New Zealand, they ran a 6-week trial where they let their staff work for 4 days and paid them for 5. Amongst their 250 staff, they found that staff were 20% more productive. Employees there recorded a 24% improvement in their work-life balance and a 7% decrease in stress levels. And another study, which surveyed 3,000 employees across many countries, Canada included, found that 78% of workers said that they could do their job in under 7 hours, while nearly 50% said that they could wrap their job up in 5 hours or less. So I'm reading this and I'm finding it super interesting. And by that point, we had just finished our 8th annual Human Rights Film Festival that nearly burnt me out into oblivion. And I knew we needed to change something, and I couldn't go through another work year like that. And so for anyone who knows me and knows how quickly I get excited about things and how impulsive I can be, we decided that we had to try something new. So last year in January, 2 months before the pandemic changed the way we further worked, we launched a 4-day work week with our staff as a 3-month pilot. And we told ourselves if it went well, we'd extend it. And it went well. We extended it to a year, and we just wrapped up our first year study. So I'm excited to dig a little bit deeper into the data with you.
Yeah, I mean, you took the word right out of my mouth. This is a fairly radical idea for arts organizations, especially within Canada. How are you measuring the success and response to these changes?
Well, thanks for pointing it out. The first thing, it is a fairly radical idea here in Canada, but it's not so radical elsewhere. It's true that it was very challenging to find any sort of precedent or data here in Canada, but this debate Around a 4-day work week is top of mind among many European economies to reduce burnout, to make workers happier, to be more productive and more committed. The Netherlands is a great example. They work 29 hours a week. So it turns out that we at JAYU, we may be one of the first in Canada to do this, or at least one of the first to be really public about it. So either way, there's very little Canadian data. So there's two ways I'm going to answer your question. The first is actually around staff and measuring impact around staff. And the second is around all the things that we have to measure as a charity, which is finances, impact, participation, and reach. So the first thing, I'll explain quickly what we did. We went from working 5 days a week to 4, but we continued to pay our staff for 5. So for many of us, depending on the week, we may be working anywhere from 6 to 8 hours a day over 4 days, or 24 to 32 hours a week. And no matter what, anyone who works at JAYU full-time is being paid to work for 40. Nobody at JAYU should be working on Fridays, but we're all still being paid as if we're working on Fridays. So knowing that we are about to invest anywhere from 8 to 16 hours a week into paying each staff person to literally not work, what will be the impact on ourselves and the workplace? And so we just completed a workplace study actually this past week on Monday, which I'm really excited to share. And I'll break that down between productivity and well-being. So for productivity, with our staff, 71% of our staff felt more productive working 5 days versus working 4 days versus working 5. 71% were taking less meetings or spending less time in meetings. 86% agreed that they were taking less breaks throughout the day and focusing more on work. When we surveyed the staff about how much work can they complete in a week, when we asked them if they're able to complete all of their work in a 5-day work week, only 33% of staff said that they can complete all of their work in a 5-day work week. But when we asked them that same question about a 4-day work week, 86% of staff said that they were able to complete all of their tasks. So even though there was less time, they were still doing all of their work. And so when we asked staff if they worked on the weekends at 5 days a week, 83% responded sometimes or never, versus during a 4-day work week, we saw that number drop from 83% to 43%. On personal well-being and health, 100% indicated that they have more time for family, friends, or hobbies working 4 days a week. 100% feel a better work-life balance working 4 days versus 5. 86% felt an improvement on their mental health against, of course, the pandemic in the background. 86% felt more focused throughout the day. We saw a huge drop-off in staff needing to self-medicate. So we left the word self-medicating quite vague. It could be maybe drinking, it could be other ways of self-medicating. But for self-medicating to cope with stress, we saw that number drop from 77% of staff self-medicating during the 5-day work week to only 29% self-medicating during a 4-day work week. Excuse me, and 100% agreed that reducing the work week from 5 to 4 days a week reduces burnout, makes workers happier, more productive, and more committed to the organization. So against the backdrop of what you presented at the beginning, that close to 80% of individuals in the arts sector are experiencing higher levels of anxiety and stress, we actually saw that number completely drop over the course of the pandemic for us. The other thing, we saw that the impact on our staff was really great, but what was the impact on work? So we went back to look at all the things that we're measuring, that we're telling our funders that we're doing. Are we engaging the same level of people? Our audience is remaining the same? Are we still raising funds? So last year, in our first year of this pilot, we saw our revenue grow actually to the highest that it has ever been. We raised more from individual donors than we had ever raised. We were not only able to hold on to all of our staff, but we hired additional full-time staff and grew our team. And we expanded our programming to include more events year-round that were attended by more people. I just want to be clear, I don't want to lay all of this in the lap of the 4-day work week, but I owe a lot of it to the fact that staff are feeling more rested, they're showing up to work more focused, and they're getting much more done.
Amazing. So what were the unforeseen effects, both positive and negative, would you say?
Yeah, so shifting from a 5-day work week to a 4-day work week, of course, and going from working 40 to 50 hours a week to working 24 to 32 hours a week doesn't come without its growing pains. We've had to, and we're still developing policies around how this works. We're continually tinkering with how we do it. We've tested out different working hours, different off days, and even though the data shows that we're more productive and doing more in less time, I still think that there's a way to go to reaching peak productivity. So I think spending less time in meetings, using more productivity tools like Slack or Basecamp is something that we're exploring. So how do we reach a point where we're these big meetings that are taking up a huge chunk of our days become a last resort for all of us? Working from home also was an unexpected but welcome surprise. So we surveyed our staff to better understand the impact of working from home and what it had on them. So what we found was 70% of our staff found that they were working less overtime from home than in the office. 86% of staff agree that not commuting to work plays an important part in reducing their overall stress. And 100% of our staff agree that working from home has allowed them to be more flexible with their time and with their personal life. So we're now at a place where we're seriously examining the efficiency of actually going back into a physical workspace once COVID ends and seeing how our relationship to the actual office may change as a result of this positive change. And the last point I want to say really quickly is that it may feel weird for an employee or an employer to not be paying staff to not sit in a seat for 40 hours a week. I find that logic model, though, to be flawed. I mean, if you're still doing the same amount of work that you are already going to do, but in shorter time, as our data shows that our staff are doing, then we should be paying them the same. Staff shouldn't be penalized for doing more in less time. And this idea that we should only be paying our staff when they're working, like we own them, like we own their presence in the seat for 40 hours a week is highly problematic. And in my opinion, rooted in outdated and oppressive ways of thinking. This is especially true if employees are just doing more. You'd be paying them to do the work anyway, so why not pay them to rest so that they can come back stronger the next week?
Yeah, I think you said it great during our session yesterday when we were talking about this. And I asked you, what would you say to the people who say that you're paying your employees to do nothing? And you said, well, if you're paying your employees for 40 hours a week anyways, you're still paying them to do nothing because they don't need all of that time.
Yeah, it's
So
absolutely true. Very true.
yeah, so it's been a year since the pilot program, and I already know the answer to this, but I'll ask it anyways. Will you be sticking with these changes? And more importantly, is this something others can do? So the idea of having a healthy work-life balance doesn't seem so radical.
For sure, there's no going back. We can't go back to a 5-day work week. It's just, there's too much data here to prove that it's just been super efficient for us. And I also don't want to mischaracterize the 4-day work week as the be all and end all of solving workplace stress. Work can still be stressful. It's still a job at the end of the day, and it comes with its surprises and buckets of stresses. But we try to make sure that those off days are the exceptions to the rule rather than the norm. For a workplace to truly thrive, you have to also invest in culture and how you speak to one another and how you address power dynamics, how decisions get made, at offering healthy benefits, at creating equity, and always asking yourselves who's sitting at the table in a decision-making capacity. At Jayu, we also offer an unlimited paid sick day and unlimited vacation day policy, and we give our staff extended paid breaks twice a year, especially after very busy times, so that they can rest. So all this to say, Jayu is not the perfect workplace. I don't think any workplace can ever be perfect just because every employee has their own unique needs and expectations, but we really do try our best to make sure it's a balanced and equitable workplace. And a place that celebrates and encourages our staff to thrive outside of work, because when they do, they thrive at work even more. And for any of the leaders out there who are listening to this, full disclosure, Jayu is a charity with an annual operating budget of under $1 million, way under $1 million. We don't have all of the resources in the world, yet we found a way to do it. If the 4-day work week is something you're interested in doing, and it's something that I highly suggest you take a serious look at doing, then take the steps to do it. Most times the only thing stopping this from happening is not money itself, but it's your relationship to money and the limited and restrictive ways we think that staff are entitled to that money, that they should be present for 40 hours to get it, even if they're not being productive for 40 hours. The other thing getting in the way of it, to be blunt, is the idea that is you as a leader. You have the power to ask yourselves the same questions that I did and to try new ways of doing things. You're probably already asking yourselves these questions anyway. So you don't have to get wrapped up in all of the reasons why it won't work, but instead take a step in, test out a pilot for a month or 2 or 3, tweak here and there, and start exploring and appreciating all the right reasons why it will work, because it likely will. And worst case, you tried. And hey, at the end of the day, you've chosen to commit your lives and jobs to working in the arts, and you continue to do it through a pandemic. So if that's not the biggest risk you've already taken, I don't know what is.
I think you said it great right there. Just dip your toes in a little bit. It doesn't have to be a permanent change. Try it out for a month or 2, or like you guys did for 3 months, and then decide whether or not to extend it.
Absolutely.
Yes, our final pair of speakers are also practicing the 4-day work week at their organization. So there is some traction here, but they're not here to talk about that. They will be chatting about the work they're doing within their community. So Camille and Camille, can you tell us a little bit about the Indigenous Curatorial Collective and the work being done?
Yeah, I guess I can start, and it might be good to explain why we're both here, because we're a dual director organization. So Kemi and I both have equal power in the organization, but my job is to mostly speak about administrative duties, and that's my role. So I'll speak a bit more of our history, and then Kemi can introduce our programming and the more exciting things about what we do. But in a nutshell, the Indigenous Curatorial Collective, previously known as the Aboriginal Curatorial Collective, we were so happy that everybody voted to change our name to the Indigenous Curatorial Collective in October. It was a much needed change. But we were founded in 2006 based on a series of conversations and discussions about the landscape of the art sector and the lack of inclusion of Indigenous curators in the production of our own narratives. And so our organization formed to advocate for the need of more permanent full-time positions for Indigenous curators in institutions so that we could start curating our own shows. Seems a little bit ridiculous now that that was in 2006 that was happening. And so one thing that we're noticing that, from this founding vision of the organization, that it was really about developing more positions, needing more Indigenous academics, curators, arts professionals across the sector broadly. The landscape has both changed and not changed at all. So we see a huge amount of calls for job applications, academic applications for Indigenous researchers, et cetera, and very few people are actually applying. And when they do apply, one thing that we have been hearing is that there are very low retention rates in institutions because what many Indigenous folks working in these large places, they're often asked to work outside of their contract, which is very emotionally draining. And so that's kind of the portion of the work that we do that I focus on, but I'll let Kenny talk a little bit more about our programming.
Sure. So yeah, through our programming, we have like 2 main goals, I will say. So it's, of course, as Camille mentioned already, it's like increasing project and opportunities for Indigenous curators, art creatives across the country, and also even like across the borders for our members, but also for emerging curators, emerging artists. And the other big important goals of our organization, it's finding ways of creating more relationship between different curators, artists across the country, and building kinship. So we have our annual gathering where our members and everyone is coming together, and we have a couple of days of like organizing some events, just talk, spending time together, so people can also talk about the challenges that they're facing in their job or as independent creators, depending what they're doing, but also also talking about what's going on in the Indigenous art communities in general, within the art world, art industry in general in Canada. So our programming is really diverse in a way that we working with different institutions to organize some specific events like residencies or any type of, for example, screening events, roundtables. So really increasing opportunities for creators and artists to have the possibility of talking about what they're doing. So really simple like this, but it's still something that we need to fight for, like giving more opportunities for Indigenous art creative here to have the opportunity to just discuss about the amazing work that they're doing. And also the way that we're working with institution and partner is really in a long-term partnership. So our relationship that we develop with our partners are really meaningful. So we want to take the time to have real discussion about what we want to do with them, why we should partner with them. And this way of working, it's also pushing against the capitalist and like white supremacist way of working in like emergency and this way of just no reciprocity. So we want to work with institutions that are really accountable to the public and to Indigenous art curator, and a good reciprocity within our organization and them. So this is mostly what we try to do as a small team. We didn't mention it, but we're only 6 employees now, I think. Yes. So we're trying to do a lot, and we also try to, of course, please our members, our community members and our institutional members. We have an institutional membership program that also we only started building this like not a long time ago with our amazing colleague Emastine. So we're doing a lot, and we're trying really our best to support our communities. This is mostly what we're doing with our programming.
Yeah,
In
brilliant.
like a couple words.
Brilliant. And speaking of that community support, last year ICC launched Curating Care. Can you tell us a little bit about that initiative and what you saw in the Indigenous curatorial community that led you to develop it? And what did it accomplish?
Yeah, I guess I can start, but Kemi, jump in whenever. So kind of like Jayu, we are a very small organization. Like we we don't have a huge operating budget, but we do a lot with what we have, or we try to do as much as we can with what we have. And one thing that we noticed, so Kemi and I were in Regina at the beginning of all the closures. So as museums and galleries were closing their doors, postponing programming, canceling events. We were sitting in Regina as all of our partners canceled the event that we were there to plan. And so we had a few days just to sit there because we couldn't reschedule our flights. And so we're just sitting for days in this hotel restaurant without anything to do. But one thing that we were able to notice was so many people in our community on social media posting about how their gig had been canceled, how an exhibition had been postponed, and they were really waiting for that check. And so, you know, we were just seeing all of these posts, and we realized that we needed to do something really quickly. We needed to do anything. And what I saw was all the institutions that I was kind of connected to at that time were sending survey after survey after survey to artists and curators. And to me, it was very obvious what people were needing was money, because checks and, you know, all that wasn't clear when that was going to come in. And so we, Kemi and I just were sitting there, and I was like, we need to figure out how to give people money. And so I'll let Kemi explain the rest.
Yeah, so we literally came with this idea in like one afternoon of offering specific fees for people to send 2-minute videos where they talk about how the COVID-19 impacted their revenue and their art, what's their practices, and also how they practice care in their own practice, artistic practice, but also within themselves, with their self or with their community. So this is how we also started thinking about how care is important for Indigenous artists or Indigenous creators, how we can take care of ourselves and our community in this like really difficult time. So people send us like amazing 2-minute video, and like, I don't know, I think in a couple days we receive already like a lot of videos and submission, and then we just share them on our social media and our Vimeo account, and then people start seeing those video, and then we receive more and more, you know, responses, and people start sharing those video, and we saw that people just people were craving for this connection within their own community. So for us, it was like beautiful to see how it's created this like networking and kinship through this video, and then we receive more funding to support more artists and creators. But Camille can explain this more.
Yeah, I think one thing that made this program and all of our emergency support efforts so effective is that because we're a small organization, we don't need to go through multiple levels of, bureaucracy to get a check into somebody's hands. So once somebody submitted a 2-minute video, we could send them an e-transfer 10 minutes later. And it was very quick to just get money into people's pockets. So that was very effective and is what the community was needing at that time. But because it, I keep on saying that it went viral. I suppose for like the Indigenous community, it went viral. Like a lot of people heard about this. And it was actually because of an email that I was accidentally CC'd on, and I just took advantage of the situation. That the In Spirit Foundation found out about what we were doing and decided to partner with us to support it more. And so it helped give us more money to support artists. So, yeah.
I think the project's great. I spent some time just looking at the videos from the curators, and it's also, I don't know, it's so soft, it's so welcoming, it's inspiring. It is that kinship and that community that you guys talk about. But based on what you've learned from the Curating Care project, what were some reoccurring advice your community of Indigenous curators gave on remaining resilient?
Yeah, maybe I can start about that. Well, being resilience for many Indigenous art creatives, it's literally finding ways to continue doing their art in there's like during these weird times. So for a lot of folks, it was already difficult to receive any materials or like having access to resources to continue creating, or finding ways of having some opportunities to show their work. So the resilience were coming really from like artists talking about how elders and their community are like supporting each other, and also the resilience is coming also through mentorship. I will say that I saw it in this video. So people were talking a lot about how they get inspired by different artists to keep doing their work, how it's important to support youth and emerging artists through their practices. So this resilience is again really anchored in like kinship, I will say, and like training opportunities also that people like were talking about. Yeah, I don't know if you want to add more, Camille.
I mean, I might just add, like, I can talk more about it when we kind of expand into community cares, but I think a major thing that I was very concerned with when we started this was the momentum that the Indigenous art sector has been building over the last 10 years. And I very honestly was worried about that loss of momentum. So again, for an artist, like losing an exhibition, while it doesn't necessarily seem like a big deal for an institution, it can be the difference that makes somebody's career. And so having that kind of momentum of having an exhibition opportunity followed by a residency, like having this going helps to create new art. And so with these kind of opportunities stopping, that's kind of one thing that I was seeing, and that I do find is still worrying. But I think that what we were able to hear through this program is just that there's so much care, like even in a time where it's so stressful and it seems like the world is falling apart, where people are, hoarding toilet paper, that people still can talk about how their mentors helped shape their lives and all of these things. So it's just like a really beautiful, poetic way to bring a little bit of love back into a really very stressful time. So yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about community cares. So the community cares emergency response fund for First Nations, Inuit, and Métis individuals working in the arts was born out of the desire to support ICC's community during COVID-19. Can you speak to what this fund is and what feedback you've gotten from those who've received it?
Yeah, I can start.
Mhm.
This was a huge project. So basically, after curating care, gained a little bit of attention, we were contacted by the Canada Council of the Arts to see if we could do something similar on a much bigger scale. And so we, needing to do anything that we could for our community, said yes, obviously we will help in whatever way we can. And so through this, we wanted to make sure that we would reach the widest possible audience, that as many people as possible would have access to these funds, but we would distribute the funds. So we partnered with the Indigenous Screen Office, the Indigenous Performing Arts Alliance, and the Inuit Art Foundation, who helped to get the word out, helped to accept applications, all of this. But we wanted to have that very simple application method that really didn't require a huge amount of energy and labor on the part of artists needing support. Yeah, and it could be support to create a piece, but it wasn't necessary. It could be to go out on the land, to go buy groceries, like whatever was needed by the people that applied. And so basically, we were able to give out $440,000 to Indigenous artists during the pandemic in $1,000 checks. So each person would get $1,000, could use it on whatever they want. And I will say, it was very intense for a small team to, overnight become a funding organization. Like, we were not expecting that. I will say that I learned a lot about, funding programs, and have a lot more respect for what funders do, because it is very complicated. But I think one of the main points that came from it that stands out to me is that we announced the program on a Friday, and by Tuesday we had to close it down because we had over 500 people apply within, just a couple of days. So while that seems like, oh yeah, a lot of people are paying attention, to me it shows how necessary that funding was for people and how much they needed it. But then one of the things that we do, because we are such like a community focused organization, is that we, whether it's over email, over the phone, we spoke to every person who applied, and then made sure that they could apply over the phone, apply over email, send it by text if they needed to. We made it so accessible for people. And so a lot of folks commented that just isn't available for them. And so we were really thinking about ways that we could make opportunities just with us more accessible. And so that's kind of what I think about in my administrative duties, is how to make our work more accessible for more audiences. Yeah, that's it.
I think you guys are got it exactly right. And being a small organization, you know what they wanted. People needed money, and you gave it to them. And you made the application so accessible, which is pretty much unheard of in arts funding. Okay, so now we'll be moving towards the audience questions portion of the session. But before I pass it on to my colleague, Monica Hakala, who will conduct the Q&A, I just wanted to speak for about 30 seconds about Business and Arts Executive Leadership Program. This program was developed in response to a need and demand to nurture a diverse talent pool of arts leaders in Canada and prepare them to transition to extend their current leadership to take on roles in leading some of Canada's largest arts institutions. Our goal for this program is to strengthen and amplify our arts leadership across Canada. And with that, we are proud to open the call for participants for the second intake. For more information on the program and eligibility, please visit www.businessandarts.org/leadership. All right, Monica, over to you.
Thanks, Corinne. Okay, so starting us off on our first question, overwhelming upvotes for this one is towards Gilad. And the question is, how did you encourage buy-in for a 4-day work week with your board?
That's a great question. I'm laughing because I wasn't 100% open with the board when we started this entire process. I'm thankful to have a board that puts a lot of trust and faith in my work and how I steer the team. The way that this whole thing was designed from the very beginning, it was a pilot project for 3 months. I knew that after 3 months, if we were in a disaster, whether it was financially or at work in terms of culture, that there was like there was a way to get out of it. After the 3-month period, of course, this is when the pandemic is also starting to happen, and finances are all over the place. We noticed that we were still exactly where we were in the previous year. At 6 months, we were actually beginning to grow in terms of revenue and in terms of the programming that we were starting to offer. So it wasn't probably until about the 6-month period that I started talking more to the board about it. But the board is mostly concerned with the financial and legal health of the organization. And on the financial side, we're thriving, and on a programming side, we're thriving. So we're at a place now where there's full board buy-in, I would say.
Nice, thank you. Our second question is about the 4-day work week as well. So I'm going to direct it to anyone who'd like to answer that one. And this one is, how did the 4-day work week work during the festival season? So much work in the arts is project-based, and I can imagine it would be difficult to maintain the limited hours once things start to get busy.
Yes, I'll take it because it's a festival specific question. Of course, there are busier times of the year. It's still a workplace. There's still things that we do that we can't always do within 6 hours of a day. So for us, festival season got really busy between September to December. In that time, we were still encouraging our staff, though, to try as best as they could to balance their hours. So if they happen to be working 10 hours on one day, try to work less the next day. The one thing that we do at our organization, though, and I mentioned this in the talk, is we give an extended time off to balance all of the work that they were putting in. So festival wrapped up in December, on December the 10th. We gave the staff a few days off. We came back to debrief, report, figure out what worked and what didn't. And then we gave the staff a month off as a paid break in order to recuperate, spend time with friends, spend time with family, and do whatever they needed for self-care. We also have busier times in the summer. In the summer, we do another 1 week paid break in order for the staff to balance themselves and come back. And doing both of those things, again, has not impacted workflow. It's not impacted revenue. It's not impacted the amount of people that we engage with in a year, whether it's youth or people who attend festival or people who listen to our podcast. It's all stabilized and in some places grown. So.
Awesome, thank you. Our next question is directed towards Shelly Ann, and it's, how would a guaranteed or universal basic income support the mental and physical health of artists and arts workers?
Thank you. I think that's a really important question to address, which is interesting, and especially during this time where many of the staff out here who are unemployed, for example, whether it's professional artists or not, or arts workers or even other professions, the CREB is actually very helpful to them in terms of they were, some of the artists I was talking to, they were suggesting that it was actually a little bit better to be on the CRB, but once it's done, then they have to look into how to apply to, CRB or another form of income source. So that was very interesting. And yes, I think it would be very helpful to have this, minimal income that's coming in for anyone, actually, not only arts workers or professional artists. I think that would really help secure, and really try to overthrow the precarious nature of, the contracts and gigs that currently the artists are relying on. So I think that would be very helpful. Yeah, something that we should definitely move towards. I believe there was a pilot project that's being done. I'm not sure which province, but we have piloted this at the government level.
Awesome, thank you. Next question isn't geared towards anyone, but it's again concerning the 4-day work week. So I'll open it up to anyone who'd like to answer. And the question is the workload the same, whether it's a 5-day or 4-day work week? As a part of the change, did the organization change their priorities and demands?
I guess I'll jump in. The workload has remained the same. I think we have to break away from thinking that 5 days of work means 5 days of work and 4 days of work means 4 days of work. There's workload that we need to complete. And we're finding that in 4 days, we're able to do it. The reason behind it is when we have 8 hours of work to do a day, we fill it oftentimes with a lot of distractions, a lot of long meetings, a lot of workers are distracted by their own social media, they're distracted by other things. And so we thought if we were to remove these distractions, how efficient can we make the workplace? And so we're finding that by working 6 to 8 hours a day over 4 days, we're able to do the same amount of work that we were doing in 5 days over 40 hours a week. The reality is if you were to ask anyone, do they truly work 40 hours a week, every single hour? The reality is that they probably don't. And so we sort of figured we might as well be paying them for those hours that they're not working to just rest, so that the limited hours that they have at work, they're spending them being more productive.
I might just jump in with that if that's okay, because we kind of also just started doing the 4-day work week. And kind of like you, like since we started, we've more than doubled our revenues for the year. You know, again, it's impossible to say if that is a result of doing it. But I think like one thing that's really important, and like I like that question about festivals and, you know, how you maintain that in busier times, because we do a gathering each year that happens, you know, in the fall, and it is a very busy time. I think Kimmy can speak more to how busy it is. I'm just, you know, making sure everybody gets paid. But one thing that is really important for us is having that Friday really be like, we are not accepting meetings that day. And so during, you know, our busier times, to have one day where we just say there's no meetings on this day. We won't be hanging out in Zoom. We won't be, you know, whatever. And so that's kind of something that I found has really been very beneficial. You know, making sure that Friday is a day that you know, you don't have to show up if you don't want to. If you want to have a super low key hangout with us, you can, and it's very useful. But one thing that we also did was we just took December off to be closed, to spend time together as staff to like figure out our inboxes, just organizing our email, and just like allowing ourselves that time to care for our like back end admin, you know, heaviness that really piles up. And just saying no to all meetings has, maybe I'm projecting, but it has been very useful for me. So yeah, that's what I'll say about it.
Perfect, thank you. The next question is directed for Camille and Camille. And it's regarding Indigenous cultural workers being asked to work outside of their contract. Are there supports for these workers or guidelines for contractual clauses to help address the issue? And then following up, are there systems that exist to hold organizations accountable for exploitative behaviors, tokenism, etc.?
Okay, I will try to take a stab at this question. Jump in whenever you want, Kimmy.
Okay.
So right now, there's not a lot that's happening right now. We are trying to develop programs for Indigenous folks working in institutions and working alongside institutions to have that contract literacy. So to be able to read what's in their contract and what they're being asked to do, but also to be able to have a community that you can come to, you know, ask a friend, like, my boss just told me this today, is this appropriate? And have that professional support to know the appropriate ways to respond. Because often when we do respond to those very inappropriate requests that are outside of our contract, it it often ends in being treated differently in the workplace because we're not being amenable or flexible with these different requests. And then I will say that many Indigenous folks in most arts institutions are often the only one there. And so that labor of having to, I hate this word, but to decolonize the arts institution is often put on one person, and that's impossible labor to do. And that wording will never be in a contract. You will never see that in a contract, but we're often asked to do that work. So I will say that what we have developed is an institutional membership program because we were asked to do this accountability work for free, but we can't do it for free anymore. And so we basically set up this program where institutions can pay in, and we will work with institutions one-on-one. We had a roundtable with all of our institutional members in January to talk about what some of the main questions are in inclusion, diversity, and equity work for just quick words that I'm finding here. And that has been a good way to just start conversations that need to happen. And with the idea of more long-term solutions, so not just hiring one person right now, but hiring people for the future and training Indigenous folks to become leaders in the arts so that we can support one another from those leadership roles. I don't know if you have anything to add, Kimmy. Thumbs up, yeah.
Yeah, no, I think this is pretty much it. I think this institutional membership, it's also there to make sure that the institution can start really a real reflection about how they work with BIPOC artwork in general and how they can be more accountable. And it's a long-term process that many institutions want to do really fast. And we also tell them that it's not possible, that there's step to accomplish. But yeah.
Perfect, thank you. Next question is a really quick one for Gilad, and is the study that you referenced earlier published anywhere? A lot of people were asking about that one, actually.
Yeah, I saw that in the Q&A where we're just tweaking it and finalizing it. It should be up within a few weeks. I can send it over to Arts Fest or Business and Arts, and you guys could help promote it. We're in the process of revamping our whole website, and a huge chunk of it will go towards speaking more about the 4-day work week. So it'll be posted there as well, but I'll make sure to share it with you guys so you guys can share it out to the public.
Perfect, thank you. The next one, I think it's directed to Gilad, but it's applicable to everyone, and it's with the reduction of meetings and working hours while working remotely. Do you shift any approaches to maintain team connection and conversation opportunities?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think all of us in the pandemic have experienced a shift in workplace culture. I think not being there in person obviously makes an impact on how we connect with one another. It's something we're exploring at JAYU. It's something we understand is affecting us as well. One of the things that we're doing, we're testing out right now in the morning at 9 a.m. We have a stand-in 10-minute coffee meeting where we don't talk about work. It's just a way for us to check in and see each other for 10 minutes. We have this book of ridiculous questions, and we'll usually open up to a random page and just ask ourselves a question. But it's just a way for us to engage with ourselves. We do like a trivia thing together at the end of every month. We have a thing called Thirsty Thursday. So we end the work week on a Thursday, and anyone who wants to come can have a casual drink. But we're still exploring ways of boosting workplace culture through the pandemic, and also in working a limited number of hours.
Got you, thank you. I think we have time for one more question, and I'm just gonna go ahead and edit this one in myself because keeping it in line with a lot of the questions that I'm seeing in the chat box. So to all of you, do you have suggestions on stuff that works for you to maintain your own wellness during unexpected workflows, just to avoid burnout as an artist, as arts admin, just something that's applicable to all of us?
I was laughing earlier because a friend of mine is one of the attendees, and she was asking how myself as a PhD candidate and an executive director maintains a balance such as this. And also as an independent curator and a writer, it is hard. And there are, like, I'm not going to sugarcoat it because there's no point in sugarcoating anything. But there are some times where I suppose the heaviness of being an executive director is too much. Like, it's an impossible job. And I think, like, once you recognize that it is an impossible job and none of us are fully trained to do it. Like, you know, I'm not a tax specialist, but I need to be a tax specialist. I don't have an accounting degree, but I need to be an accountant too. And so, you know, knowing that, I think, helps me because I can really recognize where I don't have skills. And I'm like, I would say that I'm very good at saying that I don't have a skill and then finding the person that does have that skill, that they can do it. Because I know that if I need to figure it out, it's going to cost a lot more for, you know, the value of my time to figure that out. Whereas it would take somebody a lot less time to figure it out. But it's funny because I have it in my bio now that I'm a long distance runner, and I kept that out of my professional bio for a really long time. And I find it so funny because it's so central to everything that I do. And I have added it in because it is what makes me able to do everything that I do. So, you know, going out for a run in the morning is what makes me me. And so having those kinds of small moments to myself kind of helps to clear my head at the beginning of the day. Like, it doesn't solve that I need to, you know, figure out our fiscal budget or, you know, solve a staffing issue. Like, it doesn't solve those things, but it at least kind of helps me to make sure that I don't have I can't look at my email during that time, or I can't like stress about our social media in that time. So for me, it's long distance running, but that's like a very specific niche.
Maybe
I
I
love
can
that.
add.
I'm a runner too.
Oh,
So go ahead, Camille.
thank you. I just wanted to add a little bit about this subject, thinking about the way that we're working also as a team, is that we having a constant conversation about what's our priority within our work and our team, with what we want to do with project, and also taking less work but more meaningful. So we have specific partners or specific project that we want to do during a year, and we tried to keep doing this and nothing else. So we're not start feeling burnout by like different kind of events project that we want to do everywhere. So we have this constant conversation as a team, with a real conversation, meaning that we're really honest with each other about what's our boundaries as employees and as person too, and make sure that we also take care of ourselves, but also keep an eye on others when we know that maybe they're saying yes to everything, but they maybe should say maybe no, like Camille, maybe you should, you know, take it easy today, or just little things like this that actually really help us feeling good about what we're doing, but also bring some love in our team, which is really important. It's really help us feeling good working every day. It's really simple, but I think it's rooting again in like self-care.
Perfect. Thank you all so much for taking the time to do a bit of an extended Q&A. Thank you everyone for watching. I'm going to pass it back over to Karen.
All right. Thank you so much, Monica, and thank you so much, panelists. Before I hand it over to Business and Arts President and CEO Aubrey Reeves, I just want to thank all of our speakers today and ask, do you guys have any final thoughts or anything you want to promote? Where can we find out about where to find your works? Shelly-Ann?
Thank you. Thank you so much for the stimulating and wonderful discussion. I also learned a lot today, which is really, it's really good. And I'm so happy that we're all promoting health and wellness in our communities. So part of the Alamalka Green Artist Health Center, what we have is a holistic approach to the well-being and for artists. So we do have something called the Joyce-Ann Stigmas Fund. So where we, it's a subsidy program for artists, and it's something that if they're eligible, then the artists would receive $750 that goes towards any type of healthcare that they would like to access in the center. And so so for example, it's up to $750 per year, and it is renewable for another year as well. And so what this provides is it covers up to 75% for each visit. So if there's any, if this could benefit, anyone that be something that perhaps you could be interested in as well, I'm just going to put the link below so you can have a look and see if this would benefit anyone you know. Thanks.
Brilliant. Gilad, where can we find out more about you and Jayu?
Yeah, thank you. So anyone who wants to learn more about our work, you can visit us at jayu.ca, that's jayu.ca, or follow us on social media at Jayu Canada. We have a screening coming up. It's our last Tuesday's presentation of the year. It's coming up on the last Tuesday of March. It's a story about a young Palestinian woman who's looking to join the Palestinian police forces, one of very few women in the country who's doing that. It's free. You can sign up. I think you can sign up next week. I'm also encouraging people to sign up for our newsletter. We send out this great weekly e-newsletter. It's full of resources, full of information around local events, and we're also sharing things about Jayu. But again, thank you to everyone for inviting me to share today.
Brilliant. And Camille and Camille, tell us about your individual art, ICC, whatever you want.
Yeah, I will say the best way to know about what we're doing is through our Instagram. It's where, you'll get the most up-to-date information on what's happening. And I say that because we are in the middle of going through a website update. It's still there, but it's still our old name. So it's acc-cca.com. And so you can find kind of historical information, sign up for the membership program there. But we will be updating that in the near future. And I cannot wait for our new beautiful website to be here. But that will be the place. So check us out on social media, on Instagram. It's the best place.
Great. Full disclosure, I love ICC's website. I think it's great. The design of it is so cool. So I guess my last thing is talk to the audience a little bit. So let us know what you thought about this session and what would you like to see in future sessions by emailing info@businessforthearts.org. We're looking to build out what the future of this series looks like and our podcast also. So your feedback will allow us to craft more engaging, thoughtful, and relevant content. And as always, we will be sending out a follow-up email with the recording of this session and all resources discussed. All right, over to you, Aubrey.
As CEO of Business Arts, I would really like to say a huge thank you to everyone involved in another fascinating discussion. First, a big thank you to our presenting partner, Power Corporation of Canada, for supporting the speaker series. And I'd also like to thank our supporting partner, Manulife. Many thanks to our amazing panelists today, Shelly-Ann Lee from the Alan Malka Green Artist Health Center at the University Health Network, which I have accessed in the past for physiotherapy. Gilad Cohen of Jayu, and Camille George Usher and Camille Larrivé, both of the Indigenous Curatorial Collective. We're so grateful for your contributions and insights today. And also thanks to Christopher Deloge from the Toronto Sign Language Interpretation Center. Listening to Camille and Camille, I was reflecting a little bit on my own curatorial background and the original dictionary definition of a curator, which is one who is the caretaker of something, usually an artifact or an artwork. So over the years, of course, this definition has evolved as curators have come to work with not just artworks, but directly with artists. But we still have to take care of the artwork while also taking care of the needs now of artists to ensure their work is supported, while also taking care of the needs of audiences and the community that the exhibition or the institution is serving. This makes for a lot of multifaceted needs that are sometimes at odds with each other and put a lot of emotional and social demands on the curator, which of course have been even more heightened during the pandemic. I think all arts workers, whether in artistic, technical, or administrative roles, also share that duty of care to that trio of the artwork, the artist, and the audience. But it's really difficult to do a good job of caring for others when one is stressed or struggling to make ends meet, or we're just simply exhausted. So listening to everything today, we all need to think about that duty of care to ourselves. And as Gilad talked about, we need to find ways to lessen the demands on ourselves and our teams so that we have time to take care of our own needs. In this industry, we're always so good at doing more with less. and achieving amazing artistic productions on tiny, tiny budgets. It's time to flip that around, to do a little less with some more support. And as Shelley-Ann detailed, when we are struggling, whether physically or psychologically, we need to be able to ask for care from others without fear of repercussions. So, you know, there's no easy answers on finding that balance of caring for others versus caring for ourselves. But I feel like I learned a lot today to help take some healthy steps for mind and body. And I hope everybody else did too. So thank you, everyone. Final reminder that as was mentioned earlier, the Executive Leadership Program deadline is coming up next week on Thursday, March 4th. It's a fantastic opportunity for aspiring art leaders. So please check it out. And yes, visit our website for details of all upcoming webinars and other news. Thank you very much. Stay safe and stay healthy, everyone.